on.
We ready? Oh, let me get my
Looks like we are.
little microphone here.
Oh, yeah.
I might have something I want to say. First of all, thank you for the wonderful lunch. Those of you who missed out on that lunch really missed something great. Sherry, what'd you make us? What was that? Tell us all about
that
this.
That is from the Moosewood, the latest Moosewood.
Hold on. Don't say it yet.
Okay.
Test.
There you go.
So, welcome back. We had a wonderful lunch, and Sherry is fixing to tell us what she made.
It's a good recipe from the latest Moosewood cookbook. It's called Summer Stir Fry with halloumi cheese. And
Halloumi cheese.
Halloumi.
Yummy.
Yes. And then, the multigrain mix of like all kinds of good stuff from Trader Joe's.
And we had the sweetest grapes.
Oh, they were delicious grapes.
Right with it. So it was a perfect blend. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Sherry. So you guys are missing out on all the good food, but you have food that others don't know about. So we had a good lesson, but I did want to clarify one thing because it bothered me. In my teaching, I was making a point about Samuel and the place that he has in God's eyes. And somehow I messed up. And Mark said, good. He's glad to see that I'm slipping. In my mind, I was thinking about a passage where Samuel is mentioned as one of the men that if he was standing before me right there. So everyone who saw me teach watched me go to Ezekiel 14, where in my mind, I thought Ezekiel 14 says Samuel is one of these guys. And he wasn't there, and I thought, who moved Samuel?
That's why I don't have any notes.
So now it appears that the Word of God now has the passage I was looking for in a different place. It's in Jeremiah 15. So I have to begin there because it's very important to me to set the record straight. In Jeremiah 15, it says in verse 1, "Then said Jehovah to me, though Moses and Samuel were to stand before me, my mind could not incline towards this people. Send them out of my sight." What I read was, Daniel and Job, and, that was a passage I read in Ezekiel 14. It's the same idea. In other words, if you put the most righteous men of all time before me, it won't matter. So here in Jeremiah 15, God tells Jeremiah that even if you put Samuel and Moses in front of me, I wouldn't incline towards this people. Now think about that. These are men known to intercede for Israel, and God is done. He is done with these people. He said, get them out of here. And so the point remains the same. My point when I was teaching that part of the class was that, that God had not even revealed, at this stage that I was reading about where there was an infrequent vision, the word of Jehovah was rare. My point was that even someone like Samuel, who had such an elevated status that, as I just read in Jeremiah 15:1, that God said, even if he was in front of me, I wouldn't incline myself. So that was the point. I apologize for missing that. It just, like I said, I crossed the two. But those are both good passages that there are times where when the people have transgressed at such a place, both Ezekiel 14, verses 14 and 20, and Jeremiah 15:1, where God says, you put these people in front of me and it still won't matter. So that's pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful. Now, one thing while we're in Jeremiah 15 that I'll talk about, in the days of Samuel, there's this interesting passage that we read in 1 Samuel 3 that says that the word of Jehovah was rare in those days, yakar. In Hebrew, it's yakar. It means rare or precious. In Jeremiah 15, Jeremiah is often called the weeping prophet. I don't know if I really like that, but the idea is that, you know, he's in this mode, sort of he's presented as being melancholy, but he does go through, as any of us would, this really burdensome times. He's alone. And he's, in Jeremiah 15, it's a very powerful passage. He's telling God, woe is me. All right, I want you to look at verse 10 of Jeremiah 15. He said, woe is me, my mother, that you have borne me a man of strife and a man of contention to the whole earth. You see his point? He's like, everybody hates me. Now think about that. The priest, he goes to the temple. Jeremiah 7 is the first time, I think, where he goes and he stands in the temple and he gives them the word of Jehovah. I mean, that's not a popular place to preach this message against the temple, in the temple. But notice, he feels like everybody's against him. I have neither lent, nor have men lent to me. Yet every one of them curses me. Jehovah said, have I not provided for your welfare? Have I not made the enemy entreat your intercession? In the time of evil, in the time of affliction, shall iron break iron from the north and brass, your substance and your treasures, and so forth. He's telling him, I've been taking care of you. Now look at verse 15. This is Jeremiah back to Jehovah. O Jehovah, you know, remember me, be mindful of me, revenge me of my persecutors, take me not away in your long suffering. Know that for your sake I've suffered insult. This is pretty strong words. Watch him. It gets better. Your words were found and I did eat them. That's that putting the word in him, just like Ezekiel 2 and 3. And your word was to me the joy and rejoicing of my heart, for I am called by your name, O Jehovah, Elohim of hosts. I sat not in the assembly of the merrymakers, nor rejoiced. I sat alone because of your hand. You filled me with indignation. Why is my pain perpetual and my wound incurable, refusing to be healed? Will you be to me like a deceitful stream, like waters that fail? And then there's a white space. He asked God, he said, look, I gave up everything. I don't have a friend. People hate me. It's a heavy burden. And then he says, I want you to imagine a mirage where you're in the desert and you're dying of thirst. And you see ahead of you a body of water. And you muster the last bit of strength and you get on your way, and as you get a little bit closer, it dissipates and there's nothing. He tells God, you didn't give me water. You're a deceitful brook. Now he's talking to the Creator here. Now look at the next verse. Therefore thus says Jehovah, if you return, then I'll bring you back. They're having a little back and forth here. If you return, I'll bring you back, and you shall stand before me. And if you bring out the precious from the vile. Now that word precious is the same Hebrew word as 1 Samuel 3. Jeremiah's told to bring out the rare, the precious from the vile. Then you shall be as my mouth. Let them return to you, but return not thou to them. He's telling him, you're not going to go back with the people. Don't turn to them. You just keep doing what I tell you to do, saying what I tell you to say, even if it's not popular, even if you feel like I've abandoned you. You don't have a choice, Jeremiah. Notice, and I will make you to this people, here we go again, a fortified wall of brass, and they will fight against you, and they shall not prevail against you, for I am with you to save you and to deliver you, says Jehovah, and I will deliver you out of the hand of the wicked and will redeem you out of the hand of the terrible. So Jeremiah he appeals to God, basically says, look, I'm alone, don't have any friends. And God says, yeah, okay. Return to me and I'll return to you. And then the next chapter, he tells him, look, by the way, you can't get married. You're not going to have children.
No.
You're not going to have any joy whatsoever, basically, other than me. He's telling him this is your sustainment. Now, remember, Jeremiah has to witness everything crumble. He has to tell the kings, Zedekiah has to tell the monarchy, you're going away. The temple's going to be destroyed. And there were people who didn't believe him, and they even brought witnesses against him and tried to kill him. But he still maintained the truth and spoke the word, no matter what.
My question is Jeremiah in a better place now than he was when he was on this earth walking around? Is he in a better place? We basically started out talking about the kingdom of heaven being real, real dirt, real air, real, it's here. It's not we're not going anywhere. And I constantly see old friends and they say so-and-so passed on and he's in a better place. That's
right.
my question.
Is
Jeremiah in a better place now?
Well, let me answer it this way.
Okay.
Biblically, I know a lot of people who've suffered great loss.
Sure.
The first thing we want to know is Granny, is so-and-so in a better place? And ministers over countless generations have put forward this idea because it helps to ease the pain of losing someone. This is an indescribable thing that people go through, and it's part of our existence. Even some of our friends have lost family members, and it's very difficult. Now, biblically, the Bible describes it this way. It describes that we are among there are two groups of people. There are those who are among the living and those who are among the dead, right? The Hebrew Bible presents a beautiful picture, and it describes when someone dies, it will often say, and they breathed their last, or they gathered up their feet, breathed their last, and they were gathered to their fathers.
Right.
All right, I like that idea. What does that mean? We don't know. Now, it indicates, some believe, some suggest that it means they were buried in a family tomb or whatever. I think it means more than that. But we just don't simply know. But here's what we do know. If you go to Daniel chapter 12, for instance.
Shirley Wallace had asked me this question during the chat, and that's where
You took her straight there. That's good. That's good. Daniel 12 is something that I think is very instructive. And it says in chapter 12, verse 1 of Daniel, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great chief messenger, who stands for the people, the children of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation till that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." And it goes on. So the idea in the Hebrew Bible there's not a lot.
Yeah.
There's not a lot. There are a few other passages. We'll start there.
There's a lot of theology involved in that one little verse.
That's right. People that can expand on it, but the image is there are people who are asleep in the dust.
Bill Monroe has a song.
All right.
Mother's not dead, she's only asleeping.
Yeah.
He must have gotten his theology
Maybe
right
so.
there somewhere.
One thing I brought this up this week with somebody I knew, and it's like, because of their life, somebody has passed on. My life now is better because I think about them. In other words, it's the land of the living. I'm still in. You're still in. I'm just talking to and remembering that person for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It makes my life better. So it's kind of there's also another way of encouraging someone on this whole aspect because I'm not sure about the theology there. That was a big debate even in the so-called New Testament about the resurrection and, do you believe in that or do you not believe in that and so on.
But I'll give you an example. Even in the New Testament, the book of Acts, Peter makes the point, and I'm a little bit more crusty on the where it's at in Acts.
I got you. Somewhere in there.
But yes, somewhere in the book of Acts. Peter makes a comment. He said, we know where David's grave is, because he's quoting Psalm 16. In Psalm 16, it says, you will not suffer your Holy One to see corruption. And he says, this is not talking about David. We know where David's grave is. You can go there. You know, it's right there. So the idea is they had this idea, was David in a better place? He's in the grave. He's among the dead right now. Right now. But see, the Hebrew people had this incredible idea that a lot of other people didn't have. To the Hebrews, they believed not in immortality of the soul. They believed in resurrection of the dead. So here's a difference. So here's the way I can explain that. The Greek idea, most of the world, Christianity has inherited this, and to some degree Judaism and other religions who claim at least to be based on the Bible, get this idea from antiquity. It's almost in the air.
Right.
Paul's in a better place or whatever. The idea is that whenever we die, your soul goes, because people have an idea that a human, let's use me, I'm body, soul, and spirit. And so they believe that when I die, that my soul goes to be with God and so forth. And then the confusion comes in with theology, that one day the Messiah is going to come back and the dead in Christ will rise. And you're like, well, I thought they were already there. What do you mean? Well, that's when you get your body. And you're like, wait a minute, you're going to raise my corpse at that time? Will I need it? I mean, won't I already be in? So it gets confusing. So biblically, and I know that a lot of people are saying, well, Ross, you don't know. This is easy. I'm not trying to take away someone's comfort. Right. The Scriptures describe a peaceful sleep. That's what I believe. But it does not describe a person is made of body, soul, and spirit. A person is a body with spirit or breath equals soul. So man becomes a living being. We get the first example in Genesis 2:7, and it says, and God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam became a nishmat kaya, a living breather. So here's what it means. You've got this body, and you breathe into it life, which is the breath of God, the Spirit. Body plus spirit equals a living soul. That's why the Bible can describe a soul that sins dies. A soul can die. The idea that the Hebrews brought forth is that at some point in the future, that God will once again sound the trump, and Isaiah chapter 18, awake all ye who sleep in the dust, arise, with the sound of the trumpet, right? A resurrection, if you will. The Spirit enters back into and reinvigorates, relivens, and then you come back. So right now, according to the biblical text, as I understand it, those who've gone on before us are in a sleeping state. And I like that idea. They're sleeping with the Father. What does that mean? It's not my body necessarily. If something happens, God forbid, when I'm 120 and I close my eyes and gather my feet, I'll be there. The body, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I know it sounds, but it's very earthy. And then at some point, God, who is the creator of all life, brings you back. Now, what does that look like? I don't know. So back to the New Testament idea. 1 Corinthians 15 is one of the most interesting passages from antiquity about this subject. Paul, whether somebody likes Paul or not, I don't really care, but as a historical look at this document, the point being that people would, in his day, he's going to Greeks and Romans and all over the Mediterranean world, and he's telling them about resurrection of the dead. And you know what they're saying? That's the dumbest idea any people ever came up.
Come back to the dead?
The heck, you're going to come back to this? It's like Aristotle, Plato, all these kind of thinkers are like, man, I want to get out of here.
Right.
as Tabor points out in
that's
one of
kind
his
of-
classes,
Yeah, we
they
went back.
they define this life as being chained in a dark cave.
That's kind of my whole point.
Yeah,
Because that's what the Hebrew, understanding is, that, live this life. This is good. God said it was very good.
That's right.
So, to change from, can't wait to get out of here, but in the meantime, I'm going to try to save a bunch of souls.
Yep.
Which is, if you're religious, that's what
Yep.
you got to do.
yeah,
Is a good thing to realize that this is what I have, and I'm going to make the best of it. I'm not
Yep.
saying I'm going to be selfish and enjoy myself. I'm just saying,
yeah.
I'm just going to make the
Appreciate
best
life,
of it. I'm gonna
yeah. Celebrate
yeah.
life.
Your kids, your grandkids, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so let me be the
And
the
remember those
opposing
that passed
thought
on.
here, because this is how I always perceived that thought of, oh, I can't wait to get to heaven. It wasn't that I didn't love and appreciate this life. It's that it's almost like we were having a conversation about Facebook earlier about, oh, there's so much garbage coming at you. And in my mind, it was like once we get to the kingdom of heaven, whether it's planet on earth or in heaven above, you're
Have to
not
leave
going to
Facebook.
have all the evil, all of the bombardment of distraction from being in total awareness and love with your Creator.
Yeah.
And that was where I always had that desire that it would be better than here because it wouldn't be filled with all the
Yeah.
garbage.
The image would be, though, if, let's just say, if at my house, I never washed the dishes, I never took the trash out, I never mopped my floor, I never cleaned the bathrooms, I never did anything to fix my house, and someone came over, and I was a little bit embarrassed, and I said, look, I know it stinks in here, I just can't wait to move to a new house.
Yeah.
You know, and someone would go, well, my God, you could have a
understand.
new house here if you get a shovel and a rake. You know,
I
so,
understand.
and I know you get it, but that my point would be the task that God's put before us is, and he says it, Deuteronomy's real big on this. It's like, you have life and blessing and death and cursing, choose life. And our job then becomes to fix the world. In
Yes.
Judaism, I love this, tikkun olam, to fix the world. What if, but see, we generally, I grew up in, and I'm thankful for my upbringing because it's where I fell in love with the Bible. But you almost, through Christianity and even Judaism to some degree, although Judaism has this great idea about tikkun olam, fix the world, but you get the idea that this fate, the coming kingdom, is not a coming kingdom, but we're going to a kingdom. You know, it's like I can't
it's
wait
forever and
to
ever.
go to, and it's going to be perfect, and we're going to be singing, and they're going to
Gonna
be,
behold his
gold.
face.
yep, that's right. And these are beautiful ideas. But what the Hebrew Bible does is it turns the onus on us so that you and I now have a task to bring that kingdom here. All right, so for instance, in Exodus 28, chapter 25, verses 8 and 9, he says, create for me a holy place that I can dwell in your midst. He doesn't say, I'm preparing a place for you so you can come dwell in my midst. You make your place right, and I'm coming.
Yeah.
And so it flips it.
Yeah.
So if my Christian friends, and I have a few, I think, that said, well, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm going to heaven. And you know, and they have that view, I'd say, well, I wouldn't be so sure. Jesus of Nazareth is at least attributed, these words are attributed to him, let your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
See, and even the book of Revelation, where it ends,
Yes.
what do? You look up and you see the heavenly Jerusalem coming down.
To earth.
See, these people are apocalyptic, yes, but they're apocalyptic Hebraic, at least to some degree. These writings are presenting the same view, believe it or not. Resurrection of the dead, not immortality of the soul. Paul makes a big point in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. See, I still do have some of this in it. But in where he says, Brethren, I would not have you ignorant. It's King Paul always spoke King James
Yeah,
English. I would not have you to be ignorant concerning this mystery of those who've fallen asleep.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
See, so the idea is that, and it also says in the twinkling of an eye and so forth. The idea that's presented biblically, Hebrew Bible, and even predominantly in the Christian writings, is that there is this idea that when the end comes, that those who've fallen asleep will be raised. Now, Job chapter 19, verse 25, has a very interesting passage. He says, "For I know that my Redeemer lives." And at the last, now it's translated variously, but it basically says, "A last one will arise upon the dust, and from my dead body I will see." You know, it's like he describes it from the ground looking out,
Right.
which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
But you do get glimpses. The thing is, to your point, Dave, and I like that, and we've had this conversation before,
Sure.
the Hebrew Bible tells us, live now. Live now. Here, now. You know, we raise our children, we enjoy the flowers and the trees and the beauty of the world around us. Look, yes, there are bad things, but our job is to plant heaven in the midst of this. And if you look at passages like Exodus chapter 17, you have this battle between Amalek, where Moses is up and he's raising his hands, and as he lifts his hands, the children of Israel prevail. But when his arms get tired, they're taken, they're getting pushed back. So they hold his arms up, and the battle is against Amalek. And notice it says this: because a hand is against the throne of Yah, there will be war with Amalek and Jehovah for generation to generation. We are truly in a battle. And throughout the generations, the attack has been against the throne. It's against God's kingdom. Now, is it some spooky boogeyman or something? No, it's people around you, just people who choose not the good. They try to thwart the establishment of God's kingdom on earth.
Even with good intentions.
It could be. It could
doing
be.
what's right. Which leads me to, the practical application of Torah, justice. In the news, there's a current situation where there were a group of teenagers on a bridge, and it was 60 feet to the water, and they were debating. This young girl, this teenage girl, was thinking she was going to jump, dive off, and it showed the video. She kept hesitating, and a girl behind her pushed her, and she ended up getting seriously hurt. So the interview was going like, well, what do you think should happen to your ex-friend? And the girl is saying, I'd like to have her have some consequences. And today's Torah reading, it comes up about eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And if you do something to your fellow man, the same should be done to you. So if we were to see Torah followed in this situation, would that require that young girl that pushed her be pushed off the bridge too? This is how I'm trying to wrestle in my mind, what would practical justice look like in this situation?
That's a great question, and I would offer my insights to say this is the way I would think about that. Just as an example, I'll be Judge Judy. How badly was the girl hurt?
She had some ribs broken, and I can't remember. It wasn't like paralyzed, which it could have been very serious.
Oh, yeah, she could have died.
Yeah. She was walking, talking upright.
And did they say how the girl was acting, the one who pushed? Did it say, is she remorseful?
She, when she was asked, she said, well, what's not on the video is that she had told me to push her if she didn't do it. And then the girl that it happened to said, I never said that.
Yeah.
And so...
That's not exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
So you can see the girl,
She have two different opinions.
Thing.
Yeah.
She just, go ahead and do it, you know? And
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is I wouldn't push her off.
No.
Now, there are people, here's what we don't need in the world today, and there are a lot of people who want this system that's in the Torah in place, and I'm afraid that it would look a lot like ISIS.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there are those Taliban
Due
Torah
process,
folks.
Judgment with no
Yeah,
mercy.
that's right.
Due process is
So we have to use our head. If I'm the judge in this case, the first thing I'm going to say is we're not pushing the other girl off.
No.
You know, we're not. I mean, this girl who's injured could have been killed, and she's already injured. So by pushing another one off, now I'm
Plus, you could create more. You could do worse than an eye, a
Yeah.
whole body for an eye.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. You take it too. So, but there are ways, and a lot of it depends. And the beauty of the way that the Jewish legal system looks at this, and I say Jewish on purpose, Judaism has had a long time to think about these things. And what they say is, first of all, it doesn't mean you lost an eye, this guy poked your eye, you poke his eye out. You know, I think it was Gandhi that said, by eye for an eye made the whole world blind. Well, that's a poor understanding of eye for eye. It means, to Dave's point, equal reparation. So you don't, it just means you don't take it too far. You have to use good judgment. And in fact, in this particular Torah reading, it says, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, righteousness, righteousness you shall chase. So the girl has to understand, you push this girl off and you can't do, I mean, that's not acceptable. I mean, I don't care if she told you to push her off, you should
And
say,
if she was considering
no.
jumping,
Yeah. Might have just been a mean girl. She wanted the pretty girl out of the way. I don't know. But I think that we have to use common sense. But the other thing is, no one died in this. Now, the Torah is very particular about how do we react, right? There are cases where, and it's described in this Torah portion and others. For instance, if I'm out chopping wood with Dave, and well, let's not use me and Dave because let's say Bill and John are out chopping wood, and John, not our John, different John, you don't know him. He's chopping wood, and the axe head flies off and hits Bill.
Yeah.
And it kills him. Now, some might say, so you got to kill him with an axe head. No.
Well, no, in
an
this
accident.
reading, the refuge cities make
Exactly.
a place for that.
Exactly.
Like it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, so we have to determine what was intentional. Now, if we determine that this girl, if it was an attempted homicide, that brings it up to a different level, or,
she
you know.
had a hatred for that girl.
Yeah,
that she pushed
was it
before.
malice? Was it whatever?
Yeah.
I know I'm not directly answering it, but my point would be extenuating circumstances have to come out. There are cases where if someone commits a crime, they have to help injured people. Let's say this girl was
Well,
in a
yeah,
wheelchair.
You see that the Jewish legal system says financial restitution, pay
Yeah,
for the medical bills.
That's a good start.
Yeah.
That's a good start. And if she needs somebody to carry her books, maybe this girl needs to carry her books, you know. I mean, there are things that can be done that don't result in
right and wrong. So to
yeah.
speak.
Trish,
Try to fix what broke.
Trish Casey Brennan says, you become his eye. In other words, you poke somebody's eye out, you got to walk around with him, help him through the, whatever. So there are ways now, but a lot of people are very judgmental and harsh. Like, oh, by God, you did this and you get this.
Yeah,
But-
you got to remember that the girl or the person that would go up on the bridge and stand there, there's got to be some fault there also.
Yeah.
If she wasn't chasing after righteousness to go stand there and dare people to push her off.
But
Yeah.
no,
I
she
mean,
was considering jumping. I mean, she
Yeah.
was,
So
she
I
was fixing.
didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I get it, yeah. You have to weigh every side. In fact, one of the interpretations of righteousness you shall pursue, because it's talking about judgment. One of the views is that you have to defend the defendant and you have to defend the rights of both parties, basically.
Yeah.
So you have to present righteousness for both sides, because there are cases where we don't know all the details. But I think that it's real important when we read through this. One of the first things that comes out in this Torah reading, it says, you shall appoint judges and officers. in your towns. Now, one of the problems in the world today, I think, is that we tend to put all our eggs in the basket of a president, a king, a dictator, a single ruler, whereas the Torah, when it's talking about its government, you know, this establishment of a commonwealth, what's the first thing it talks about? Judges. You know, a lot of towns, people that run for, we don't even think about how do we put the right people in those positions. And yet that's a key. It's really a key.
Kind of like, you know, when a king was put over Israel, God basically says, as long as they're obedient to me, I'll be the Savior. But if they don't,
out.
Yeah, they're out, and if the people don't, they're out.
Yep.
Do both of them. So the underlying, I guess, appointment to getting a judge is whether they follow, in this case, Torah, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or are they obedient to God's word, which I went to this morning, and you probably need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Are they a righteous
God's word
judge?
in your mouth.
Would they be a righteous judge? Yeah.
Always keep in mind that God creates good and evil. So he's the one that, you know, when you think something's gone wrong or gone bad, you know, people tend to say, oh, well, that's the devil or that's something else. That's God. That's Jehovah, creating good and evil. So the reason he does that is so you can do good. You can choose righteousness at that point, or you can choose not to. So you can choose to help somebody, or you can choose not to.
Well, it's, you know, that's God's will. You know, that's the tough one. You know, free choice and God's will.
Look at the idea of capital punishment, just as an example.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people in our society have opinions about capital punishment. I think recently the Pope was in the news and he said it should never happen. You know, you're killing, and that's again, in his interpretation, that's against God's way. So he came out, and a lot of people attacked him for it. And there are other people in the religious community who go, if somebody does this heinous act, we ought to beat them to death with a soap in a sock and, you know, and whatever. And that's you know, because we believe, hey, you committed that. We don't have room for you in our society. I've said that. You know, that person did that. They need to take that person out. Don't put him in jail. Don't feed him or her. Don't give them a last wish. Just take them out. Take them out back and do away with them. Well, the Torah has that idea.
Sure.
But I want you to recognize that one thing that a lot of people forget in this conversation is that whenever you're a witness against someone in a capital case, and you say, I saw Billy intentionally murder that person, you as the witness, now one witness won't do it, you have to have two or three, but the witnesses who testify against that person have to be the first one to put their hands on this person. Now, the other thing that comes out in the idea that we're talking about in capital punishment cases is that it represents all the people. So, like, you can't say they need to put that guy down. No, it's we need to put that guy down. You see the difference? It's not like you can sit at home and watch The Price is Right while they carry out an execution.
It's easier to say they need to take care of that.
They need to take care of that.
I need to take care of this.
Yeah, it has to be, and so one of the things that came out of this is that Judaism, because of everything that Judaism became, when they would read these texts like this, it became almost impossible to bring about the death sentence. You know, that this was what was the result of it. You know, you can't just say, I saw him do that. Was anybody with you? No. Well, you see, so it has to be, there are certain stipulations associated with it.
And repercussions.
And repercussions, yeah.
Because if you don't tell the truth, or you find out later on that you were telling a lie, then you're going to be put to death also.
Yep.
Well, that was where the eye for an eye in Deuteronomy was saying a false witness.
Yep.
If they
That's right.
testified falsely,
Yep.
let that thing that they wanted to happen to that person happen to them.
Yep. The Torah does have some things, and we read them in our modern thinking, and we go, whoa, man, you know, that's, but, you know, notice that whenever things like this are discussed, it says, so that this doesn't happen again. You know, it'd be like if if someone hurt a child or an elderly person or something, and they were testified against and they were put down, as you say, may not be the right term, but you know what I mean, put down, then the next time it might be a while. I would think it would be a while because people would be like, whoa, remember what happened to,
Right.
you know. So it really, the whole goal, even in the administration of justice, is righteousness. And you want the end result to be a fixing of the problem, a solution rather than a patch. You know, it's like, how do we get this out of our people?
It's called a deterrent.
We're
A
in
deterrent.
act and react mode.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. When I was in Israel in the security school, the colonel that was leading part of the training said, whenever a terrorist, Marlene said, just like Haman and Esther, that's a good analogy. But this colonel said that when someone commits an act of terror, they have only one solution for that, and that is to what they call neutralize the terrorist. And that means that the terrorist is killed. And they said if on the other hand, someone breaks another law, if they rob a 7-Eleven, that's my example, not theirs. Do they even have 7-Eleven? If they rob a convenience store or whatever, they'll pay the price. They'll maybe go to jail. They get, if you speed, you'll get a ticket. If, however, you try to cause death and mayhem in society and attack innocent people, you're gone. And, some of the people in the group are a little uneasy with that. And he said, look, I understand that the U.S. thinks differently in some circles about this. Some do, some don't. We're not telling you that this will work where you are. We're telling you the way we have learned it works here. And
that's what we do.
That's what we do.
You guys need to do the same thing as far as learn what works there. And do it.
That's
We're
right.
bigger. We got more area and more criminals and more.
So, but there is a lot on this topic of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and so forth. But generally, to Dave's point earlier, it was broader in the sense that you can take it literally. I generally take things for what they say, but there is a point being made here that you don't carry justice further than the original offense.
It's all about righteousness.
Is the reason they had the blood avenger too. If someone takes the life of a family member in ancient society, the goal would be to get a posse and go burn down a village.
Sounds like a good, a new series, Marvel series.
Really?
Blood Avengers.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe there is one already.
I had a question about Deuteronomy, where we were reading Deuteronomy 30:11 and 12. How for this commandment which I command thee this day, it is not hidden from thee, neither is far off. It is not in heaven, that you should say, who will go get it for us to heaven and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very nigh unto you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you mayest do it. It sounds like, and maybe this is just an English translation, but help me out here. It sounds like, and you mentioned the future prophecy of Jehovah will give you a new heart. He will put it in your heart. But it sounds like Moses gets the commandment and he gives it to the people, and he's telling them it's already in your heart. So how can I reconcile those two things?
A good question. Deuteronomy 30, in my understanding, the way I read it, beginning in verse 1, Deuteronomy 30 says, and when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse, and you call them to mind among the nations, he is addressing a prophecy here.
Okay.
All right, let me show you. First of all, look at Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy 29, just to kind of make this point. And let's begin in verse 3. Just pick this up. Yet the Lord, Jehovah, has not given you a heart to perceive, and eyes to see, and ears to hear unto this day. So at this point in Deuteronomy 29, he's addressing the situation presently. He's addressing a group. I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your shoes hadn't worn old upon your feet. He's talking to them then and there. All right? As you move into Deuteronomy 30, something happens. In Deuteronomy 30, it picks up, go to Deuteronomy 30, verse 1, and it will come to pass when all these things are come upon you, the blessing and curse which I've set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations into which Jehovah your God has driven you, right? Notice this is a different setting. He's describing a situation in the future. And shall return to Jehovah your God and obey his voice and according to all that I've commanded you this day, you and your children with all your heart. See, so then this group, he's talking to a different group.
Okay.
Now look down at verse 6. Verse 5, and Jehovah your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you will possess it, and he will do you good and multiply you more than your fathers, and Jehovah your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your... Now, somebody who's had their heart circumcised and so forth, then he says,
Okay.
right? This is my view of it. So Deuteronomy 30 is written to a group that is to come.
Wow.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 30 is totally different. It totally shifts at verse 1 because they're not even in the land yet. And he goes, okay, now listen to me. Listen, everybody listen. And earlier he said in Deuteronomy 29, I'm not just talking to you who are standing here, but to those who are not with us today, meaning later generations. So what he's preparing them for is there are going to be some things in this book, just like Daniel is told, seal it up. This is for the end. So what we get in Deuteronomy 30 is a prophetic look at this people in whose heart is my Torah. Who is that?
Okay.
That's the people who chase after righteousness. Isaiah 51:7. You who chase after righteousness was mentioned in verse 1 and 2. Down in verse 7 it says, you who know righteousness, Yodei Tzedek, in whose heart is my Torah. So we tend to think about the Torah being addressed to an ancient people and having no future relevance. But that's why it's important to study closely the words, because there are things in here that are for the future. One example, hold your hand here and go to Deuteronomy 10. In Deuteronomy 10, he's talking clearly to the group at his day. Okay, I'm looking for, verse 16. Circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart and be stiff-necked no more. He's talking to a group of people who are not circumcised of heart, right? Otherwise, and they're stiff-necked. Otherwise, why would he say circumcise your heart if their heart was circumcised? It's uncircumcised.
He's like, well, I'm not talking about you guys, but those other people.
Yeah. He's telling them, you stiff-necked people, I know you, you know me, you're rebelling and so forth. So he tells them that. By the time you get to Deuteronomy 30, he's telling, look, he's going to bring you back. He will have already scattered you. He's going to bring you back, and he will then circumcise your heart so that. See, totally different.
Cool.
But it's always important within Scripture. Scripture means writings. In Hebrew, it's the word the writings. So when we talk about these texts, we have several things in the Scripture. We have poetry, we have prose, we have law, we have statute, judgment, prophecy. Not all of it's the same. It's a collection. And it's real important to follow that through. So, but the idea for us today, as I understand it, and the point of the class today is, how do we bring about a transformation of society? And our views are not necessarily the views of our neighbors.
Right.
But more than anything, it takes more than just having the word in our mouth, because you can preach it, you can talk about it all you want, but what the old saying, people, before they care what you know, they want to know that you care. And so our task becomes, how do we show people that we care in such a way, Deuteronomy 6, that they then look at the people who claim to be God's people and say, what a wise and understanding people this is. Now, they're not saying that yet. So we're not there yet. Until people start saying that, we've not attained the task.
Kind of like you practicing religion. As long as you're practicing religion, you're never going to
Actually do it.
Yeah, I mean,
You just practice.
he's practicing.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing Torah.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, you do Torah, that's not really religion. And then the idea of chasing after righteousness versus being righteous, you caught it. You caught. You're not chasing anymore. You caught it.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of little goodies in there. You know.
That's right.
You spoke a little bit about when God puts His words into your mouth. I know there's other scriptures that support when that happens, you become a new man, a different man, or so. So as opposed to the person that just is what's the word for a guy that just doesn't. He's a preacher or whatever. But he's after your money.
Yeah.
The
There's a bunch of words for him.
Yeah.
Which a nasty word.
Charlatan.
Yeah.
So but when you're speaking God's word, you're really doing that. But so yeah.
To say and to do.
Yeah.
It involves both.
So catching righteousness, that's important.
The other point on that is there are things within the Torah that we can't do, and I gave examples this week. When you get in the land, do this, and that. You know, like a lot of people say, well, they got an idol on 3rd Street. I saw this big statue of Mahatma Gandhi there, and I'd like to go tear it down because the Torah tells me to. And you're like, ease up there, Bubba. You got to be careful because, again, 29 of the 187 chapters in the Torah take place in the land. All the rest take place outside. We have to read in context. Don't be stupid. Don't be crazy.
That's right.
You're not going to go out and stone somebody because they've committed sexual immorality. Yes, it's destroying society, and yes, I agree that it is, but nonetheless, that ain't your job. Ease up. A lot of people want to go protest at, a clinic because they do certain things, and,
Even if your neighbor does something that like works on the Sabbath, you still don't,
you don't stone
You can't go there and stone him. Now, if you go through due process and that comes out to be the end result of that. I mean, the conviction, not the actual stoning.
Yeah. We ought to establish courts.
You don't have the right to go there and stone your neighbor.
Yeah, and I don't. The last thing I want right now in our society, honestly, is the religious police. We see it. We see it in some countries.
That's right.
And even in Israel, there are things that are going on, and it depends on who's in charge.
Sure.
If your particular sect is running things, you're going to be pushing your agenda. So one of the things that I think is important, though, is for us to look for the principles from the Torah teachings each week and from the Bible as we read and study. And I'll give you an example. It's interesting that when you look at Deuteronomy 16, verse 18, where the Torah reading begins, it says, Shoftim, judges and officers, you shall make in all your gates. Now that's singular. It's written in the singular. Now the way that most interpreters look at this, and the way I understand it as well, is this is a message to me. And when you read it, you ought to go, that's telling me. So we ought to look for righteous judges to put over us. All right? Now, if you don't vote, you don't have a dog in the hunt. You just get what you got. but this is important. You shall put judges and officers, you shall make, literally in Hebrew, titain, it means to put or to place, for yourself, in all your gates, which Jehovah your God is giving to you. And it says, throughout your tribes, all right? And, notice this, and they shall judge the people, and they will judge the people with righteous judgment. In other words, if you don't put righteous judges in, they're not going to put forward the effort to bring forth righteous judgment. And so don't gripe about it when they don't because you didn't get them in. Now that means you might have to get involved. Roll up your sleeves. Look at the society. Look at the world around you. If it needs changing, go stand in front of a mirror and go, I guess I need to do something. Don't look for these poor politicians to fix it. They're just as dumb as you are. And me, I should say. I don't mean to insult. I mean, they're just people. You can't expect a man or a woman who's in a burdensome position to fix the world. That's the easy way out. Let us roll up our sleeves. Let's get involved. Now,
And Moses wanted us all to be a prophet. He wished we all were
that's
a
right.
prophet, and therefore we wouldn't have to have this system.
Yeah.
Because we're all righteous.
Notice how strict it becomes. All this is singular. You shall not wrest judgment, W-R-E-S-T. You shall not respect persons, neither take a bribe. In other words, it doesn't mean like I don't respect you, you know. It means I'm not going to place your case over your case, even if I can go, well, you know.
Even if that's the majority over there.
That's right.
You're
That's
supposed
right.
to-
Yeah, don't go with the majority to pronounce a bad decision. The Torah's got beautiful principles involved. If I'm really poor, I kind of am, but if I'm really poor, someone can't look at me and go, well, I'm going to decide for Ross. He needs the money. I mean, they had the wreck. It was really Ross's fault, but John, you know, he's loaded. Look at him over there. He's got everything he needs.
in front.
And so we're going to give the judgment to Ross. Can't do that. Because you might think, well, what about the poor guy? He's poor. He doesn't have anything. Well, he shouldn't have been driving like a, you know,
No fault, yeah.
like a baboon. He's got to be careful. He messed up. So you can't make the decision. Now, a lot of people would say, but my heart bleeds for Ross. He's such a nice
And
guy.
it goes the other way around too. Just because somebody's poor and broke don't mean you can't
Yeah, that's right.
give them favor.
And flip it.
Yeah, then give them
And flip it. If someone has money and they go to the judge, this is also forbidden, and they go, hey, look, judge, how about I slide you 100 and we just make this thing go away? Does that happen in our society?
Sure.
You bet it does.
What about that lady that just won't leave me alone?
But,
The
yeah,
lady that just won't leave the
Yep.
righteous judge alone.
yep, that's right.
Just keeps bugging them and bugging
Yep,
them.
till he finally just says whatever. But notice, a bribe, get this, a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. Then it says, righteousness, righteousness you shall chase.
That's it.
Notice,
Catch it.
that you may live and inherit the land which Jehovah your God gives you. And then it gets into some specifics, like don't do this idolatry stuff, don't sacrifice the less than what you can give. It goes in and it begins to describe all sorts of wrong and bad doing and so forth. But the idea is that justice and righteousness, here's the whole goal of all this. In principle, the Torah is written about an ancient society in a world that is sometimes difficult to apply to our modern setting. Sometimes not so much. If my ox runs through my neighbor's fence and tears it down, and everybody leans back and goes, I ain't got an ox. Okay. What if your teenager gets in the car and runs over your neighbor's fence? You see, you can apply. I don't think
Ruts up
that's
their
stretching
yard,
it.
yeah.
So we have to use some common sense, and we have to look, what is the underlying principle here? What is it that we can do to advance societal gains in a righteous way. You know, I mean,
Yeah, and see, where I get a little confused is like it sounds like Jehovah's laying out all these commandments that apply to the land, that they apply to setting up this place, this physical place on earth, that his kingdom is planted, and it's a shining example to the rest of the world. But I'm over here, and so I'm not in the land. And to me, in principle, it shouldn't matter if I'm in the land or not. And I think that's what we're saying, that we still can plant the kingdom of
Yep.
God in this land,
Right where we are.
yeah,
right where we are.
because
and that-
that's the goal.
Yeah.
See, the goal is
Is to
that
get the kingdom of heaven
throughout all
operating.
nations.
Yeah.
See, ultimately, the goal is that from sea to shining sea, from the rising of the sun to its setting,
It's global.
it says, it's global. It says, what is this? The knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So how does God do it? He says, okay, I'm going to start with this little piece of property right here. It's right here. It's in the middle of the world. And if I can get you, my people, I'm calling you, I've given you a task, you plant that bad boy right here. You live it, you model it, because it's going to be so good. If you do it,
And they have to get the most improved award.
if you do it, if you can do it, now I'll give you something. If you do it, then others will begin to look and go, man, that's I want to try that. Now, is that happening today? I argue yes. I'll give you a few examples. I just read a book called Thou Shalt Innovate. Dave and Patty Tyler and I went to New York to this conference. And one of the speakers there was talking about how Israeli innovation is changing the world for the better. I just saw
the same with capitalism in this country. Innovation is what drives us.
Exactly.
If I invent something, I want to be rewarded for that, so I can go buy a new car.
creativity. And so here's the example in the Innovate book. I just saw on the internet the other day that, and it doesn't mean it's only happening in Israel, but
Sure.
in Israel they're working on ways to freeze tumors and not have to surgically. In other words, there are things going on. So this book suggests that Israel is in many ways. You've been to Israel. There's a lot of desert there, and yet they're leading the world in water conservation. They're offering water to their neighbors. They're doing desalination. They're doing things that other people could do if they would listen. And
working with their enemies. Jordan, I mean, not
They're
so
trying.
much an enemy so much, but they are working with them on that water stuff. They
Yep.
realize it's a two-way street. And that's ultimately what the whole world has to realize. We're all in this together.
Yep.
This water we're talking about here, it belongs on this planet.
yeah.
And we don't have it. We're not here.
There's a rabbinic story. Several rabbis are in a boat,
Yeah.
and one of them takes out a drill,
Oh yeah.
and he goes under his seat and he starts turning the drill. And one of the other rabbis in the boat says, hey, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm drilling a hole.
Under my seat.
And he said, well, why are you doing that? You're going to cause the boat to... He said, no, it's my seat. No, you don't understand. When you drill the hole, you're sinking us all. If you have a wish to go, don't bring us with you. Again, it goes back to what was man put here for in the first place. When God created man, before he ever created man, he looks around, according to the text, and he says, the text tells us, there was no one to take care of the place. Paraphrasing.
He made it
There's no
garden.
one to till the soil. So he says, I will make a man to guard, to preserve, and to serve. Sounds like a police officer. I'm going to make a person. That's the reason. Like if you ask somebody, why did God create us? A lot of people say to worship him. No. I'm sorry. That's not what it says. Now, if you understand worship means to serve, which it does, avad is usually translated worship, it means to serve. But our job, our task, our work is to advance the kingdom and to plant heaven here. and to do things in such a way that it inspires others to do likewise. So we have a task, and it's not about, now look, singing songs of praise are beautiful and they're wonderful, and we ought to do that. Praying is something we ought to do. Helping others is something we ought to do. But none of these things are separate from the bigger work of bringing God's presence to dwell in the midst of His people. That's what He wants.
So you brought up there two phases to planning the kingdom on earth.
Yep.
One is the hearing of the word, and the other is the spirit. So how does this happen? I mean, if we are a living soul, is it praying for, desiring the Spirit of God to be behind everything we do? How do we do it?
I think, and that's another good question, I think that's part of it, definitely. We can't force God's Spirit to fill us, right? David cries out to God in Psalm 51, take not your Holy Spirit from me. You know, he pleads to God about don't move, don't let Him lead, you know. But by the same token, we have to live our lives in such a way and try to seek to follow God's ways. But we ought to be praying, God, fill me with your Spirit. You know, this is Hebrew Bible stuff here. Make me a living sanctuary. Give me the guidance that I need. And we ought to be praying for that.
Amen.
Now, one of the things that we have to remember, though, is, and I think this principally applies, Exodus 25, 8 and 9, make for me a holy place that I can dwell in the midst of my people. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into preparing a place for our God. And I think we can take that individually and collectively. I think we ought to be seeking to live our life in such a way, because it says God searches to and fro to find that person that He can work through. And we ought to try to be that person. Noah was that person. Noah was a righteous man in his generation, right? He was complete. He was whole. He tells Abraham, though, walk before me and be perfect. Be complete, be tamim. So it says Noah was, but it says God tells Abraham to be, and that's why I bring in Deuteronomy in chapter 18, verse 18, he tells 18:13, I'm sorry, he tells the people of Israel, be thou complete, tamim. That's our job. Now you say, well, I can't do that without God's Spirit. Well, pray for God's Spirit, but in the meantime, do everything. Look, there are a lot of groups who say, in order to receive the Spirit of God, you need to be baptized in, you know, whatever. I mean, they're different, and I'm not making fun, I'm saying. But when God's Spirit moves on a person, it's because God's Spirit does that. He doesn't, I don't think you can call it in, you know. You know, I don't
It's
think
like
that.
ordering God around.
Yeah, like, you know, it.
In other words, I mean, you're picking on Baptists here. We're both Baptists, so we can pick on the Baptist thing. But you know, it goes with all the religions. You know,
Yeah.
The Muslims, they have their
Oh, yeah.
view of paradise and so on and so forth, and what they can do to receive that. And so, yeah, you know, so chasing after righteousness versus practicing religion, two different things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Two
Oh, yeah.
totally
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the other thing is there'll be a new heavens and a new earth. Isaiah talks about this. But we shouldn't expect to be taken out of our dirty, funky house and move into God's house. What, so you can mess it up too? No, he's coming. He
That's
says,
the attitude we ought to have.
you fix your house because I'm coming. That's the goal. So how do we fix the world? And I believe it starts with every act of kindness. You know, it's like The old expression, it is really,
You
right?
gotta stop.
The old expression is, you can't fix the world.
That's right.
But you know what you can do, and what I can do, and what each of us can do? We can fix somebody's world. Somebody. Sometimes
Sphere
it's
of influence.
just a little bitty something.
That doesn't mean you have to stop earning a living, and that doesn't mean you have to do this or that. I mean, we can all find a way.
You know,
I'm
I heard
working on.
somewhere where when you frown, it takes more muscles to frown
Right,
than it
right.
does to smile. So
Yep,
Might as well smile.
smile,
that's right.
help somebody
Easy.
else out. You know, when you smile and see somebody else walking around and they see you smile, it kind of brings a little smile to their
So you've
face.
done something.
Yep,
You've done something positive. That's it. Doing something positive, and
that's right.
that's kind of where you were talking about. I'm really big on this innovation thing too.
Yep,
Although I'm not a big innovator,
yep.
yeah.
Oh, you've helped me innovate all kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
That
Yes,
happens.
you are a big
That
innovator.
happens.
We're on television.
Yeah, while
Engineer.
we're on,
But the thing is, though, it's like, how do we do it?
you gotta have a reward.
We ought to all think about, like somebody might say, what's Ross talking about? You can't bring the kingdom of God here.
Fix this world.
Okay.
Pro.
All right, the truth comes out. I know that if it depends on me, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to do this. And neither is any other individual on the planet. But if we all work together, if we all do a little part, it becomes a process whereby each of us does the little bit that we can do in the little things which add up. And never, ever, ever think that your role isn't important and significant. It can be, anybody listening to me can have a bigger impact on someone's life than I would ever have. Because sometimes it takes just that act of kindness, just that being sweet when everybody else is not, helping someone with their groceries,
Or even just doing.
It does. It really does.
You say that that you don't, you by yourself, okay, but it does, because if you have your light shining and somebody else grabs their light and they light off of you, then it's a chain reaction.
Amen.
It's a chain reaction, so to me, bottom line is to love your neighbor, okay?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
when you do that, I think it just boils down to loving people and letting your light shine.
It does.
Sometimes,
And being kind.
sometimes just doing good for yourself. I know in Christianity we were taught to be selfish,
Yeah.
Don't, but I mean, the reality is sometimes you just have to do the little thing for yourself.
Yeah.
And that inspires you to do more.
Yep.
That's not selfish.
Yep.
It's not selfish at all.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a different mind thing. We in the Western civilization, we have a totally strange mindset as opposed to what the biblical parts of the
Yep.
world. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to understand it. That's the biggest obstacle right there is understanding.
Yep.
Which is kind of getting back to what you said.
Praying
earlier,
for it.
Yeah. How do we do? How do you listen? You got to stop sometimes to listen. You got to stop and pay attention.
Sometimes it feels counterintuitive, like your point about sometimes you have to help yourself. Everybody that's ever flown an airplane, what they'll tell you is in the case of emergency or loss of cabin pressure, a mask will drop from the ceiling. Now, I never pay attention, but I've been on enough planes that I've heard this enough that I kind of know what they're saying. I have what?
Flown in an airplane, not flown an airplane.
You don't know. I've flown an airplane. No, I hadn't.
Mine had an ejection seat.
I flew out of
No,
that
but
place.
so if you've been in, if you have flown in an airplane and the mask drops, what do they tell you to do? Put your mask on first
before you help anybody
before you
else.
help
Yeah.
anybody else. Because, the right idea, you may say, man, I got to help this person, I got to help
And
this,
what-
and you're going to run out of breath.
Right.
Get you and then get them.
I got to throw something in there. What if there's only one mask? What's the
Take a
first-
breath and pass it on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You got to share.
Deep sea
that one
diving.
mask, man.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I think the idea is that yes, we ought to look for ways to help. But I do know that there are some people who give so much that they exhaust themselves, or that they run out of, they give so much financially that then they can't pay their bills. I remember being pressured to tithe or whatever over the years, and actually, the preacher would say, you want to be blessed on your gross or your net? And you're like, well, I guess my gross. So I'm going to give before anything. And and you do that, and you don't even have money to pay the electric bill.
Give according to your need, man.
Yeah, and so people tend to write a check that they really can't afford. Just as one example. So the point is, look, you ought to take care of your personal needs. And if you have extra, you take care of those around you. The biblical idea of tithing is a lot different than what people taught. Someone has asked several times, would you teach on that? And we probably will get into that, probably in the next couple of weeks. But it's not what people think. Now, there is support that's mentioned for various aspects of the priesthood and things like that. But there's also, every third year, that tithe was set apart for those like the orphans and the widows, and it was strictly for those purposes. So anyway, the point is, we ought to look for opportunities to help, and that doesn't necessarily mean financial. It could be anything. Some people don't have money, who cares?
But they can swing a hammer.
But they can do something physical, or they can offer help whenever they need, your neighbor needs it. So we have a beautiful task in front of us, and look, it's not easy. If it was easy to fix the world, somebody else would have already done it. So now, here's my closing point is this: if you're waiting on someone else to fix the world, you're delaying the redemption, I believe. I believe that the more of if we push this off on, I don't care who it is, a politician, or if we go out of this world and push it to the heavenlies and to the Messiah and to the angels and whoever, I think what we're doing is we're just letting people know on the earth and in heaven that we're not ready yet. Whereas if what we say is, what can I do? Now, there are practical, physical things. There are very earthly matters. We can put, our efforts here. And, a lot of people, what's the old saying? You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. What do we need to do here, now, to help those around us and to help the world in which we live? How do we make it better? You may not fix it, and our generation may not fix it. But, man, I'm going to tell you what, we can get closer.
Sure.
You don't want to back up is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave the world to the next generation and go, man, that group didn't do anything. We can't even tell they were here. So that's the idea.
They left some good music, though.
They did leave some good music.
People that do a lot of good things that never make the news.
Yep.
And then you have people like those divers that came in to get those kids out of the cave. They had all the technical skill in the world. Most of them had specialized for many, many years. And they used all their talent, all their skill, and all their knowledge. And then they put their lives on the line.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they got paid or how much they got paid. But when your life's on the line, it ain't enough.
Yeah. That's right.
And one of them died.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that really, giving your life for somebody else, that is quite a contribution.
Yeah.
And don't know what religion any of these guys were, probably multiple. And the kids certainly weren't of the same religion. So it was an act of kindness, magnificent act of kindness.
People look around them and they look at and they focus on the negative, mainly because the media drives it so much. And we look around and we go, oh my God, this place is off the hook. I just want to get out of here and go live in heaven where everything's perfect. But think about it in the analogies that we've talked about. There's a lot of good that goes on. There's a lot of kindness that takes place. kindnesses that take place every day, and you may never hear about them. So here's our challenge. Be that person.
Yeah.
And maybe don't let anybody hear about it. You know, I really do think that if you do, and give credit where credit's due, this is attributed to Jesus. You know, if you do your good deeds to be recognized by men, you know, you got your reward. That's what he says. You got your reward. I like that. Yeah. But do your good deeds so that your Father in heaven sees. You know, and the Jewish people have, and it's in most of the prayer books, it's taken from some of the writings, but it talks about charity, which is, by the way, called tzedakah, which is tied to the word for righteousness. When you help someone, there are degrees of, like, from top to bottom. It's all good. Anytime you help someone, it's good. If I help John and I tell people about it, it's okay. I mean, I did a good deed. I get my reward. Everybody goes, man, that Ross is the holiest man I know. He helped John. John, look, he told us he helped him. We know he helped John. John knows Ross helped him, and the world knows it. Here's another way I could help. What if John let somebody know that he had a need, and somehow that need was met, maybe by me, but shh, he doesn't know it. Now, John then says, you're not going to believe this. This thing happened, and I needed this, and it came in the mail. I can only attribute it to God. All right? So the highest form of charity, according to the Jewish faith, which I love, is where a person meets a need, but he doesn't know where it goes. So the example I just gave was number 2. The lowest form is where I helped John. John knows I helped him. I know I helped John, and everybody else knows. Still a good deed. Second is when John has a need. I know he has a need. I meet that need. He doesn't know it's me. Right. So I still kind of get I helped John. I may not tell anybody else. I may not tell John, but I get puffed up. But let's say that I hear about a need. I don't know who it is, and I meet the need of a person that I don't even know. I don't know who got it. They don't know where it came from. That's the ultimate. Yeah. I think we ought to strive to do good first, no matter what form of good. But the less of Ross that's involved in that good deed transaction, known, I think that's best. And that's what we ought to focus on. I'm encouraging people to look for opportunities where you can help, where the only glory that's given is to God. Amen. And that's it. If we can do that, now again, look, if you have opportunities to help. But think about that. Think about how can I help where only God gets the credit. And that, I think, is the way we fix the world. And look, don't ever think, again, I'll leave you with this, don't think that your role isn't significant. You can't change the world. You can't fix the world. But you can fix somebody's world. Yep. And it doesn't take much sometimes, Mark, just like you said. There are a lot of grouchy people in the world. Yep. There are a lot of people who are burdened. There are a lot of people who are just grouches. But there are a lot of people who are struggling with very, very, very deep and difficult things. You know what our job is? To be there. Sometimes it's just shut up and listen. Sometimes it's to offer. Be careful. Be trained to do this. Don't just... But do what you can to fix little pieces. The world's a big place, but you know how many people live on it? About 8 billion people. If every person on earth did one act of kindness in one given day, I don't know what it would look like here. See, we
heaven on earth.
It would be. See, we tend to think,
everybody made their own bed, you know.
Yeah,
one day.
That's right.
If everybody got up and made their own bed.
That's right. Yeah, I think that as we look for opportunities, you know, it just a little bit here, a little bit there, and you chip away at the problem. Most people are focused on, man, I wish there wasn't so much bad in the world. Try to do so much good that becomes the focus. You know, and you know what? Bad sells. I mean, people love bad news. What's the old expression? A lie will make its way around the globe while truth is getting its boots on. People love a good gossipy rumor. They love bad. Let's try to make that swing.
Woe is me.
Yeah. A lot of people, we were talking about earlier, people are getting frustrated with certain social media platforms, you know. It's got so much negativity. We'll flood it with good.
We're not.
No, we love it. Me and Dave love it. Well, I think we're the only ones, but
I get to see what's happening with my grandkids in other parts of the world.
That's right.
And my
Yeah,
kids.
got you out, man.
All right, so how about we call it a day? Shabbat Shalom. Have a beautiful week, Shavua Tov, and we'll be back. Our plan is to be back next Saturday, same time, same channel. And look, if you're close, if you live, or you could be in Australia, is Jonah on? Sometimes he pipes
he
in.
was.
He really?
He
We'd
was
love to see you,
earlier.
John.
I had my glasses off.
Yep.
Come on.
Uh,
Here, look, scroll up a little
Okay.
bit. He was there.
Look at that. So if you're in Australia and you want to join us, feel free to come in and fly over just for, we're going to do a Yom Teruah, a day of the blast, and I'll keep you posted on that. We've got some things going on. And remember, we're going to be sending out our United Israel calendars. It has all the Torah readings on it, has all the festival dates according to the Jewish calendar. We'll be sending those out hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And so if you're not on our mailing list, but you would like to receive one of these handsome United Israel World Union Jewish calendars, email me, Ross K. Nichols at me.com, and send me your address, and we'll definitely get one off to you. So help us share the message. You know, if you benefited from the teaching, then click share and share it to other people in your network. Thank you for your time. God bless you. Have a beautiful week.